What if I told you that Blake Lively's carefully polished image is crumbling in real time, and that the truth behind secret subpoenas, hidden witnesses, and even a whistleblower being silenced is far darker than anyone imagined tonight? We uncover how Blake's own co-star was denied, how her inner circle may have gone too far, and how one shocking mistake from a whistleblower could unravel the entire case. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear will change everything you thought you knew about this Hollywood war. From the very beginning, this legal battle between Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni has felt less like a lawsuit and more like a high-stakes Hollywood thriller unfolding in real time, with each docket entry becoming a plot twist and each leaked message turning into a revelation. And the latest turn is almost too unbelievable to process, because as Blake's young co-star, Isabella Farah, tried to slip away from the subpoena that would have forced her to speak on the record, the judge slammed the door shut, refusing to let her walk free, and in doing so sent a clear message that no one, not even a rising actress backed by powerful publicists, can escape the weight of this case. Yet what makes this moment so riveting is not just the legal denial itself, but the layers of drama surrounding it. Because Isabella's team thought they could sidestep the entire process by arguing that Justin's lawyers hadn't done enough to track her down, but the judge was not buying it. And in a scathing breakdown, he explained that due diligence matters, that you cannot just say, "Trust me," without proof. And suddenly the spotlight shifted from Isabella's avoidance to the credibility of Wayfarer Productions itself. Because how could a production company that paid her salary, arranged her travel, and processed her paperwork claim they had no idea where to find her? The whole thing reeks of strategy rather than ignorance, and it sets the tone for the rest of this unfolding drama. Because the court essentially said, no, you cannot run, you cannot hide. And if you think the system will let you vanish, you are mistaken. But that's just one part of the chaos. Because at the very same time, another bombshell was detonating in the form of a whistleblower who once seemed to be standing firmly in Justin's corner, only to be tossed aside and discredited when the heat got too intense. And that whistleblower is none other than a Daily Mail reporter who found himself at the center of one of the most explosive accusations in this entire case. And the story of how his words were twisted and how his career was left in ruins is perhaps the most chilling proof yet of just how ruthless this Hollywood battlefield has become. Imagine. This reporter receives texts from Blake's publicist Leslie Sloan in the midst of what was supposed to be a truce between both camps. No more smears, no more leaks, no more feeding the press. And yet here was Leslie breaking that agreement, allegedly, whispering to journalists that the entire cast hated Justin, that he was impossible to work with, that the narrative needed to be reshaped. And in that moment, the illusion shattered, because what Justin's team had been claiming for months suddenly had a tangible example. Someone on Blake's side was pushing the press even while denying it in public, and for the reporter caught in the middle, it seemed clear evidence of manipulation. But then came the mistake, a single word typed in haste. The difference between saying a character was shredded and implying something far more sinister. A slip that would change the trajectory of everything that followed. Because once Justin's legal team latched onto that slip, they framed it as confirmation that Blake's camp had escalated their smear to unthinkable levels, suggesting accusations that no one else had ever dared to put in writing, and that framing became a weapon. But here's the devastating twist: the reporter himself later clarified that he had misspoken, that he had never been told such a thing, and that his error was being used to inflate the case in a way that was never true. And from there, the nightmare spiraled because Blake's lawyers pounced, threatening him with legal consequences. The Daily Mail distanced itself from him. And suddenly, this man, who once thought he was exposing the truth, became collateral damage in a much larger war. And this is where the suspense tightens like a noose. Because when he later revealed that he had been pressured into signing a carefully worded declaration under threat of losing his job, and that he had been silenced from telling the full story, the realization dawned on everyone watching that whistleblowers in this battle are not celebrated. They are crushed, discarded, and left scrambling for survival. And the echoes of that reality hang over the case, because while Isabella may still be ducking service for now, while Blake's publicist may still be maneuvering in the shadows, the fact remains that the truth is bleeding out through every crack and contradiction. And the more this case drags on, the more we see the machinery of Hollywood at work, where reputations are manufactured, where young actors are shielded like pawns, and where even reporters willing to risk their careers are twisted into scapegoats. And yet the unanswered question remains, why is Blake fighting so hard to keep these voices from being heard? Why is Isabella so determined not to testify? Why did Leslie risk breaking her own truce with the press? And why was a reporter who once helped Justin now sacrificed so brutally? These are the threads that pull us deeper into the labyrinth, and they all lead back to one undeniable reality. This is not just a lawsuit. This is a war for narrative control, and every player in it is discovering that once you enter, you cannot walk away unscathed. The fallout from these revelations begins to spiral in ways that even seasoned Hollywood insiders could not have predicted, because what started as a simple question of whether a subpoena could stick has now become a referendum on truth itself. And the second act of this saga shows us that in the brutal theater of celebrity litigation, the lines between fact and fiction are not just blurred, they are obliterated. And nowhere is this clearer than in the contradictory accounts swirling around. The Daily Mail whistleblower, who now finds himself portrayed as both hero and villain, depending on which side is doing the talking. And the chilling part is that both sides may be right in their own way, because on the one hand, this reporter gave Justin's team ammunition that directly exposed Leslie Sloan's off-the-record manipulations, and in doing so provided undeniable evidence that Blake's camp had breached its own promises. Yet on the other hand, his mistake, his fateful slip of a single word became the loose thread that Blake's defenders could pull until the entire narrative unraveled. And this is where the true danger of this story lies. Not in the evidence itself, but in how that evidence can be spun, reshaped, and redeployed to serve whichever master wields it best. And as this realization spread across the industry, the whispers grew louder. Did Justin's lawyers knowingly exaggerate the slip? Did Blake's team apply pressure to rewrite the record? Did the Daily Mail quietly sacrifice one of its own to avoid a lawsuit? The answers may never be fully known, but the effect is devastating. The whistleblower, now a man without a platform, fired and silenced, finds himself at the mercy of forces far larger than him. And that is perhaps the darkest message this trial sends, that in the kingdom of Hollywood, even truth-tellers can be branded as disposable. And what makes this even more haunting is the timing, because while the whistleblower story was exploding, Justin's team was still fighting tooth and nail to get Isabella Farah under oath, and every failed attempt to locate her, every court filing that questioned their diligence, made it appear as if she were slipping through their fingers. Yet the judge's denial of her escape attempt cracked open a window into how the court sees this game. The court is not blind to evasions. The court is not blind to manipulation, but the court also demands proof. And this balance of suspicion and restraint has now become the stage on which the rest of this legal drama will play out. Because Justin's team must prove not just that Isabella is hiding, but that they have exhausted every reasonable effort to find her. And the irony is as plain as daylight. How could they claim to be searching when her own records, her contracts, her travel documents, her basic employment files must exist within the same company? Leading this case forward, why not present them? Why not hand the judge undeniable evidence? That she has been served. The silence on this point speaks volumes, and it fuels speculation that the defense is playing a longer game, waiting for Blake's camp to exhaust itself on delays before dropping irrefutable proof at the last possible moment. And in the meantime, Isabella herself remains in a limbo, neither present nor absent, neither silenced nor heard. And in that silence, the tension builds, because the audience, meaning us, the public, is left to wonder, what is she hiding? What does she know? What could she say that would tilt the balance so dangerously that both sides seem desperate to control her voice? The suspense here is not just legal, it is existential, because Isabella's testimony may not simply clarify facts, it may unlock the deeper truth about whether this entire case is built on reality or illusion. And while that suspense simmers in the background, the spotlight inevitably returns to Leslie Sloan, whose role in this chaos grows darker with every disclosure. Because her willingness to whisper to reporters during a truce, her insistence that the cast despised Justin, her subtle nudges to reframe narratives all point to a pattern of control that feels less like publicity and more like orchestration. And when juxtaposed with the whistleblower's claim that she never once mentioned the most serious accusations, the contradiction becomes impossible to ignore. If Leslie truly had such devastating knowledge, why withhold it if she did not? Why invent alternative smears? The paradox paints her as both powerful and careless, a figure willing to bend the press but unable to keep the mask from slipping. And that paradox is now the heartbeat of this case, because it shows us that in Hollywood, perception is weaponized more ruthlessly than fact, and once that weapon is unleashed, it cannot be recalled. And as the dust settles from this second act, we are left with a tableau of wreckage. A young co-star dangling on the edge of testimony, a whistleblower, discarded by the very industry he sought to expose, and a publicist whose credibility is evaporating under the glare of scrutiny. And through it all, Blake Lively remains silent, her polished image intact at least on the surface, but cracks are forming. And the echoes of those cracks remind us that in this battle, the truth is not revealed all at once. It is revealed piece by piece, contradiction by contradiction, until the entire edifice collapses under its own weight. And as we prepare for the next turn, we must ask ourselves, how long can this illusion last? How long before the whispers become a roar? And how long before even Blake herself cannot outrun the truths clawing their way to the surface? The third act of this unraveling scandal is where the storm stops being a distant echo and instead becomes a direct strike, a lightning bolt cracking open the carefully constructed illusions that have held Hollywood together for far too long. Because by now the public has begun to understand that this is no longer just about leaked texts, courtroom filings, or clever PR spin, but about the very foundation of how power is wielded in an industry that thrives on silence, manipulation, and loyalty purchased through fear, favors, and fame. And once that veil starts to tear, there is no stopping the chaos that pours through the cracks. At this stage, the courtroom itself became less of a legal battleground and more of a theater. With every filing, every whispered exchange, every lawyer's objection feeding an audience of millions outside, people glued to their phones, analyzing every detail as if it were a murder mystery. Because in truth it was. Career reputations were being killed in real time. Legacies were bleeding out, friendships that once seemed eternal were being dismembered, and the world could not look away, because it was not just salacious gossip. It was the revelation of hypocrisy at the highest levels. Blake Lively, who once held the crown of effortless grace and marketable relatability, now looked cornered, her smiles too forced, her words too carefully scripted. And the public is quick to notice when a star begins to fracture under pressure. They can smell desperation like blood in the water. And that desperation grew more visible each time her name appeared in connection with Taylor Swift's leaked texts, with Justin Baldoni's defense filings, with whispers that even Ryan Reynolds, once considered her fiercest protector, was beginning to distance himself just enough to preserve his own brand. And it is in this atmosphere of paranoia that the deeper betrayals come into play, because suddenly old colleagues, once silent, start speaking out, whether anonymously to journalists or brazenly on social media, recounting the moments when Blake allegedly cut them down to climb higher, when she allegedly sabotaged others to maintain her image as untouchable. And these testimonies, while dismissed as bitter gossip by her defenders, nonetheless find fertile ground in a culture already primed to distrust the powerful. But the most explosive shift in part 3 of this scandal came when the legal conversation turned toward discovery and the inevitability of evidence being dragged into daylight. Because while accusations can be debated and rumors dismissed, actual text messages, emails, call logs, and contracts are far harder to escape. And Justin Baldoni's legal team was relentless in demanding that nothing be kept from scrutiny, that the truth, however ugly, however private, be laid bare in the interest of justice. And this is the very moment where the public realized that Blake might not be able to keep her secrets hidden forever. The courtroom buzzed with tension as motions were filed, and the press reported that Taylor Swift's name was not simply tangential, but central to certain correspondences. And the idea that America's most scrutinized pop star could become an unwilling witness in her best friend's implosion only added fuel to the fire. Because now the fandoms were involved, the Swifties mobilized, Baldoni's defenders rallied, and Blake's PR machine scrambled to extinguish one inferno only to watch another ignite across the internet. The betrayal that defined this chapter was not just personal but cultural. Audiences felt betrayed by the mask of authenticity that so many celebrities wear, betrayed by the illusion that these friendships were unshakable, betrayed by the very idea that the icons they worship might privately conspire against each other while selling the public a fantasy of unity. And in the middle of all of this, journalists began comparing the case to classic Hollywood takedowns, drawing parallels to scandals from decades past where one moment of exposure unraveled entire empires. And the fear became palpable in boardrooms and talent agencies because if this could happen to someone as beloved and marketable as Blake Lively, it could happen to anyone. This section of the story feels heavier, darker, Because the stakes were no longer abstract. They were immediate, tangible, life-altering, and the power players knew it. They could feel the ground shifting beneath their feet, and no amount of spin could put the earth back where it belonged. Hollywood thrives on secrets, but once those secrets start slipping, they take on a momentum of their own. And by this point, the scandal was not only about who said what, but about who would survive the fallout, who would be left standing once the curtain finally came down. And so as the curtain falls on this chapter of a story that has already rattled Hollywood to its very core, one question lingers like smoke in a darkened room, unresolved and impossible to ignore. Because what we have witnessed is not simply a legal battle, not simply a clash of egos, not simply a scandal born from the glitter of fame, but a revelation of how fragile the foundations of celebrity power truly are. Blake Lively once. Untouchable now finds herself staring down the barrel of exposure. Her name etched into headlines not as the golden starlet, but as the center of a firestorm that refuses to die down. Justin Baldoni, once doubted and dismissed, emerges as a symbol of quiet resilience and calculated defiance, his every move now dissected by a public that can sense the shift of power. Taylor Swift's texts looming over it all like a sword suspended by a single thread, promising that at any moment the narrative could twist again and leave everyone scrambling to recover. Because this isn't just about them, it's about us. About the world that watches, about the culture that elevates and then devours its idols. One whisper at a time, and as the cameras keep rolling, as the lawyers keep arguing, as the fans keep speculating. The truth is that this saga is far from over. The lines between loyalty and betrayal, between fame and infamy, have been blurred beyond recognition, and Hollywood stands at the edge of a reckoning, the silence before the storm thicker than ever before. The only certainty is uncertainty. The only promise is chaos, and the only guarantee is that the next revelation will be bigger, louder, and far more destructive than anyone dares to imagine.